that is an important question. I remind you that we had a sort of a campaign going. Perhaps Christina can tell you more about it, about universal disarmament, which sort of covers the background of all this conflict in Kurdistan and other places. Ole.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I would just like to give a brief personal report from Florence, as I think that also is a relevant input to this. And I would like to say thank you to our Kurdish friend here for the input. And I think what we saw in Florence was one step. Another previous step was the Attack-Some University for Social Movements, and we are trying sort of, and of course this meeting is also another step to reconnect European networks, initiatives, activist movements. And I think Florence was a successful step towards this, and we will need further steps down the road. And I believe what was said here about NATO is very important, and how NATO's and Turkey's role in NATO. And I understand that in Norway we have some mobilization against NATO, and I understand that there are several national campaigns or initiatives working against NATO, and I hope that the European process also can be a space where we can connect the different campaigns and initiatives working on this issue. And that another thing that was talked about in Florence was how weapons industry and militarization, mostly is Western, it's European and North American, and how Africa is overflooding with weapons. They don't have actually any weapons manufacturing themselves on the continent. And other topics that was discussed in Florence was, of course, the Ukraine or the Russian war on Ukraine, and the cost of living that is increasing all over Europe, and the right-wing, the rise of the right wing. And I think this was a good step towards creating a European process and reconnecting the networks and space. And I hope this also will be valuable input towards Tunis and towards the process the International World Social Forum and its International Council is in right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Ole, for reporting on Florence, which has been decided to have a first step towards a broader meeting later on. The date is not yet fixed. But if we stick to the question of NATO, the question arises if we would center the campaign or a campaign against NATO. There has been several initiatives. Perhaps Christina can report a little bit of what has been done from the International Peace Bureau, and then Tort has lifted his hand.
Yeah, shortly, we just have this afternoon before this meeting a webinar about together with IPP and No to NATO network and the Asian European People's Forum. And we talked about the economic war. This is one point of all the crucial situation nowadays in Europe and affects nearly the whole world, because I think every one of us knows the blockade against Cuba existing in 60 years with all the external and impacts to other countries. And the European Union are now doing the same against Russia with the sanctions, and also try to affect other countries who are still dealing and negotiating with Russia with their sanctions like the US did. And one point in this meeting was we have to strengthening our peace movement and come closer together to fight militarism and overcome the logic of war, to fight against NATO, because with NATO no peaceful world is possible, and in the same way to fight sanctions, because sanctions are another form of war, and they are killing also like a war. And we have to propose more alternatives like common security and strengthen all these organizations which are working on this. This means strengthen the United Nations, strengthen the OSCE, and of course to come to negotiations and a ceasefire in the actual existing war in Ukraine, which is in the focus. And I can also support the Kurdish colleague. It's also important to get the Kurdish question now also in the focus, because this is a NATO member who is fighting against another country, and we have to see how we can stop it. And as I said it in the meeting before, we should look what on actions will exist on the weekend on the foreign minister meeting of the NATO in Bucharest. And also we have to prepare action against the next NATO summit in Vilnius, and the network with its cooperation partners before will prepare webinars to inform about all these situations, and also discussions about the specific points of action we need. And I haven't addressed all the climate issues, which are of course related, and food issues and all the other things, but mainly my network No to NATO has another focus here, but we have to see how and where we can work together. And there are a lot of sitting in the round here and doing it. Let's see how we can go on together.
Thank you very much, Christina. Before I give the floor to Tord and then to Isabel, let me only recall, it seems now through the first intervention that we have a bigger focus than we had before. We started out in the World Social Forum in a virtual way in January 21 by highlighting under the title the struggle against militarism with the words for universal disarmament for a socio-ecological transition. Let's say that is the background where we come from, and now it seems that we have to focus more on different uh, different contradictions, conflicts, and so on. Tord.
I would like to think very much of the questions put by Ole. I think that's the most important thing. We are not discussing in general content here. What, as far as I understood, Ole talks about how can the World Social Forum be relevant for movements. It is in that context, I think it's key to discuss content. Firstly, I think I agree with Ian Vidal, who has been participating in the discussions, and you can read it on the link which Pierre George sent. And he claims that if we wanted to have a sort of a general assembly on the World Social Forum addressing the Ukraine issue, it would be impossible to come to any other conclusion than an empty statement. And he refers to that the left is so split on this issue. And that may be so. And I don't find it a problem because peace organizations do this anyway. And why should WSF do something others do better? So that is not a problem. What is a problem is that all the movements have the same problem. That is the lack of facing the multifaceted crisis. We don't have only a NATO crisis. EU is equally involved in supporting Turkey and has equally going into more and more militarization and is a main player in developing a racist world order that destroys agriculture, that mass creates refugees and then kill them when they try to come to Europe. So it's certainly not this is the very problem. We have a supermarket of progressive policies, and that is precisely the problem. Of course, we know in politics you have to do things specifically. And to us in Sweden, what we have been doing then, opportunistically, is to address a certain focus on the Kurdish issue, because here the Swedish government has changed 180 degrees. Before supporting IPD in southern Kurdistan and Rojava, now suddenly we are more or less claiming that they are terrorists, more or less PKK related. So with other words, if we want to attack NATO, the most effective way of doing that in Sweden is not only addressing NATO in general, but even more precisely on the question of the Kurdish issue. So we bring a lot of Kurdish speakers when we organized a webinar together with the International Peace Bureau, the Network for People and Peace in Sweden, and we will repeat that in January as well. So this is trivial. Salt March, whatever we do, we know very well how to develop some kind of specific campaigns with some specific focus. There is a no to NATO network already. We don't need World Social Forum for that. That is more efficient than the World Social Forum. What we need now is an analysis of the European situation, and I would say it's a total crisis. It's all of the crises at the same time, and they are acute, all of them, which means that what is needed now is precisely the possibility and the issue of relating both nature issues, natural resources, agriculture, etc., the finance market, media, the militarization, and this combination of issues. That is what the main movements need.
Okay.
And I would say that, with other words, this is necessary then with a convergence, which it seems like Ian says is impossible. And that means that, of course, I think this is very, very much contrary to why we need an assembly of social movement that enables the movements to unite. And I think that this is happening outside World Social Forum at the moment. International Peace Bureau discussed the social tsunami, and this general idea of detente and disarmament for a social and ecologically just transition, that has not changed because of the Ukrainian war. On the contrary. So the movements are able to do what the left is not doing. I agree with you. The left is split, and they split and split all the time, but the movements don't need to split in the same way. We can keep on moving with our general perspective and try to raise issues on our way, like the Kurdish. Thank you.
Very interesting thought. Thank you very much for your contribution. Convergence is the point, and how to produce it is the question. Isabelle.
Oui, je voulais intervenir sur... actuellement, nous avons tous en Europe le même problème de la montée de l'extrême droite et du refus de la venue d'étrangers dans nos pays. Et les gouvernements qui aujourd'hui sont presque tous en complicité avec les dirigeants des multinationales en arrivent à faire croire que les populations ne veulent plus se rencontrer, que les populations ne veulent pas partager, échanger avec les populations d'à côté, qu'elles soient d'Europe ou du Sud. Et je pense que vraiment au Forum social mondial, l'intérêt que nous avons, c'est que nous montrons que les populations ont envie de partager, ont envie d'être solidaires pour affronter ce qui va nous tomber
On t'écoute
avec le
plus.
nécessaire. Ah, d'accord, je reprends. Est-ce que c'est mieux là?
You speak in French in this moment. Okay.
C'est bon? Vous m'entendez?
Oui, maintenant ça va.
Oui.
D'accord. Donc je pense que le rôle du Forum social mondial dans ce contexte où les gouvernements essaient de faire monter les guerres parce que la peur leur permet de diriger tranquillement avec les multinationales sans plus tenir compte des peuples, et que notre rôle à nous est justement intéressant pour montrer que les populations ont envie de partager avec les populations des autres pays et ne sont pas dans cette logique de fermeture sur nous-mêmes dans nos pays, et que les États, les gouvernements font croire que nous ne voulons plus de solidarité entre peuples, alors que je ne pense pas du tout que ce soit l'état d'esprit des populations. Je pense que l'état d'esprit des populations est effectivement dans la peur parce que les médias font leur travail pour faire monter la peur, et que nous, ce qui est peut-être intéressant pour notre regroupement de mouvements dans le monde, est bien de montrer, en partageant nos expériences, en montrant ce qu'il se passe dans tel ou tel autre pays pour que nos expériences se mélangent et qu'on puisse devenir fort face à ces gouvernements qui s'associent aux dirigeants de multinationales. Donc le contexte européen de guerre, je pense que la seule arme que nous avons contre ça, c'est de montrer à quel point nous avons envie de partager entre pays d'Europe et ensuite avec les pays des autres continents, et de faire voir nos partages tout le temps, de faire voir nos relations et nos échanges à ceux qui pensent que l'étranger est forcément dangereux, etc. Donc voilà ce que je voulais dire. Merci.
Thank you, Isabel, to make this link to the neoliberal and the masters and politics and how we could respond to that. I would like at this point, because there's no hand raised, ask quite directly, Nina, what do you think, is, as you know already a little bit, the World Social Forum, what could be our role in this question of mobilization, of convergence, of opposing right-wing currents and governments, if I see from Italy or others already. What would you wish we could do more than what we have done already?
Hello, thank you, Leo. I'm sorry, maybe I'm not ready to for any advices for a social forum, because it's maybe depend on the what people who are involved in practice can do during this situation. But of course, I just can mention all problems, but many of these problems you already know. It's a migration problem, it's a war problem, and now I want to say sorry in advance, because in 10 minutes I need to turn to the switch to another Zoom because of the full shutdown in Ukraine. Just partly of 3 regions now with electricity, and also it will be problem maybe in a couple of weeks, because so many Ukrainians will be in Europe without any possibility to live, because it's the people who are able to find new jobs and earn money and assimilate into the Europe they came before, and now people just trying to escape from the cold and poverty, and it will be a huge problem. And I don't know how you can, how you're able to respond on this, because it's related to the government programs. It's also related to ability of people and local communities to accept this and adopt these people. And also it's we also expecting the migrants wave from the Africa and MENA region. So it's not just problem with the far right extremists, because the number of people, I think we would never even expect these problems in our dreams, because and now I know that these days many people are trying to leave Ukraine because of the cold, because of the no electricity at all. So there are no supplements, there are no waters, there are no anything. So, and maybe it's also, and I also read the statement, but I think in this statement we missed very important things. This cause is not from nothing. It's strong related to Russia aggression on Ukrainian territories, because today Ukraine was under the shelling again. It's not bombs from nowhere. We know from which countries these bombs appeared in Ukraine. And of course, we can explain this. Yes, NATO also can be response on this, or Ukraine also, but it's like inequality participation in this war. And I don't know, if you have a good context with the trade unions, maybe it's time to talk about the labor legislation. If you're close to a politician, it's maybe time to understand what we can do with the citizenship, because many people from Ukraine, from other countries who are migrants, they have no status in European Union. And it's also related to ability of to be on the labor market, to even live somewhere. And also for many of my friends, and for me too, because I still don't know where I'm living. And I'm so far from this like high level political discussion now, because in 5 minutes I need to find new place for 10 families, and I really don't know how I can react on this. So I have no advices.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you for this very impressive that you recalled us that involves with all this political discussion, the human destiny. Paco had raised his hand.
Leo, yeah, first of all, I want to thank Nina for what she told to us and put us really, for example, me, that I live in Italy and we are quiet at a hot and warm house with electricity. For me, it's just it's so terrible, everything that is happening now, that we can stay and say all these terrible things around the world. What we can do is continues in the convergence. I agree also with Tord. World Social Forum or not, the fact is that we need to convergence, and we need place where meet and where attract the attention of the newspaper, TV, everything that can tell another narration of what's happening around the world. Because we are pushed in a corner. In Europe, we see the NATO, we see what they're doing. And it's not to go deeply into the analysis what's happening, but maybe I'm very simple and not very politician, but what I can say is that we have to looking for a unite for all who is opposing this kind of word. So World Social Forum, okay, yeah, but Florence was good at the end. Was just a temptation, a first step. But we have to go out of auto-referentiality, we need to be out of our, I don't know how to explain in English, but to be out of our organization or our way to think, and try to be naked and start to unite something that can show to the world what's happening. But now it's very difficult. We are like in the 30s of the last century. It's the people are scared. The people fears about in Ukraine they have this problem of electricity. In Europe we have a problem of the bill that we have to pay for the gas, for the light. The people never imagine what's happened. And I talk about Europe, then I can talk about Africa, Mali, then I can talk about some other country. So that is something that step by step we have to try to rebuild. The history we saw that was not good for the peace movement between the two big world war, and but now we have other instruments, we have other media, we have other way to be connected that before wasn't like this. So we have to use it. So excuse me if I'm a little bit confused, but I work always on communication, and all of us, we are communicator because we do politics. So we have to find the way to break this wall that is really terrible. So thank you to all of us.
Thank you very much, Paco. I think I want now to speak a little bit about what's happening in my country and in the perspectives of a proposal. Up from a certain moment in the Ukraine war, but also that might be applied to Kurdistan. We were thinking that the most important thing is to promote a ceasefire. A ceasefire in a big movement, a global movement, independently what differences might be about who is the guilty and whom to blame more and so on, but to show to the world that there are actors who do not want peace, and that is already something which could help to press governments to take a more open stand. It's not casually that it comes out from Austria, which is a country which doesn't belong to NATO and which maintains, I think in the meantime, the only country status of neutrality. And that's where we find is our role, not so much by telling people who is right and wrong, but to press for a ceasefire. That's a proposal coming from Austria. Paco and Christina. We should round.
I have nothing to say, Leo. I just agree that ceasefire could be one simple point that can agglutinate all the movement. Ceasefire not only in Ukraine and Russia, but everywhere. That's the fact.
Okay.
Yeah, for me it was the same. For only to support your proposal. We should see how we can arrange things like this, because I think we have discussed a lot. Necessary is to act now.
Mm-hmm. Tord, let's sort of resume this first point to go to the next one. Tord.
Yeah, on the point of issues that combine movements, I think one of the things not mentioned by Ole is actually there has been a continuous process since the last European Social Forum in Turkey 2010, organized by the Prague Spring 2 network against right-wing extremism and populism. So we have been trying, especially with a lot of participation from Central and Eastern Europe, to make precisely what we discuss today, constantly discussing the refugee issue, which I think Nina addressed very, very importantly here, that it's both Ukraine, but also refugees from other places, the peace issue, the question of economic justice, and the question of peace. And that ended with the European spring processes towards the World Social Forum last year and this year. The interesting thing that we enabled to do what others have not been able to do. With other words, we brought in the young anti-racist movement, and Neringa Tuminaiti became the coordinator of the environmental space. This is precisely what people are not able to do, but I think this is precisely what is needed. We have to create a common understanding that these issues are directly linked. The racist word order might be a key. If we look at the Swedish situation, enormously many young people are into networks like Decolonize More. With other words, 5,000 is in such a network. We are trying to reach out to them. The environmental movement haven't got that problem as many other movements have. So this is a sort of a possibility to move forward. What we also see as a common issue, and I would really like to hear if this is in other countries as well, is the harassment of the movement. This is extreme when it comes to the Kurds. The boss of the security police in Sweden have announced that it should be forbidden to demonstrate for PKK. That is not up to this is a police state. It's politicians who decide such things. And what we see is this harassment of the Kurdish, and it's very unclear now with what will happen with these people appointed by Erdogan. We have to throw them out of the country. But it's not only the Kurds, it's also the peace movement. The most well-known international diplomat in Sweden, Hans Blix, who was essential in opposing the war against Iraq, as he was inspector of these so-called mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction. He was opposing this whole war. He has been claimed to be Putin's battalion in Sweden by the main morning paper. So there is a general harassment. Anyone who speaks up against NATO can be labeled Putin agent. But now this is also addressed against the climate activists. And with no change of law, suddenly they are accused for sabotage, with other words, a form of terrorism. So what we are trying to do is to start to say that we have a common interest in the movements, all movements, to oppose this attack against the right to protest. And I guess this is a typical issue of convergence, where we could use the social forum protest to find common ground against this demonizing of movements. So yes, there are some issues, I think, that unites in this kind of regard. Thank you. Oh, finally, I looked at the minutes from Florence, and what has not been mentioned is that at the meeting, which was addressing the social forum, the World Social Forum, the main content, people coming back all the time, was agriculture, via campesina, permaculture, and even saying that we have to start to grow our own garden. So the food issue is certainly at the center of many people's interest, and so certainly it is in Sweden, where we say peace on earth and peace with earth, and have a strong connection to the transition movement. Thank you.
Well, since there is no more intervention, let's sum it up. I'm a structuralist in social science. So what remains for me of all the different interventions is there might be, we agree on convergence, but how to produce it towards the outside. And I would say that the spearhead of such a movement might be, as a matter of fact, the claim for a ceasefire, in order to detect also who are against the ceasefire. and from there on cover up the two most important or at least the most actual present conflicts, which is the Kurdish conflict and Ukraine. And from there on, have this broad understanding what peace really means. Peace cannot be without justice. Peace cannot be without in the present framework of the economic system. It cannot be without the climate movement. It cannot. That's to say, peace cannot be with repression against the actors who promote it, and so on. There is a whole wheel of variety of issues which can be covered by a main intention, a main goal, and everybody could participate in that and produce in such way a convergence between the different movements. That's what I provisionally would guess could be a sort of a synthesis of this first part. Let's go to the second part. Rosie has told me that she would prefer that somebody from Europe and the International Council would take up the moderation of this point, and I would like to ask Isabel if she would be so kind to take up the moderation of this second part, because you have been also in most of the discussions around these different topics. Isabel.
Non, franchement, je ne me sens pas aujourd'hui dans une équipe. Désolée, en improvisation comme ça, non.
Paco. Paco? Would you be ready to make the moderation on the second point? Paco? Well, if
As I to go to the to care to the family, you know, I have my problem every day, so I can stay here other 15 minutes, no more.
Okay.
Sorry.
So anybody else proposes in him or herself for the moderation? If not, I will continue.
Ole.
Okay. Well,
I suggested Ole.
Yes, I asked him, but he said he has to leave. Ole?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm just listening in while I was walking, so I'm afraid I'm not in a position to moderate. Apologies.
You're walking in the cold of Norway. Okay. Well, anyway, the second point, and we can somehow consider it as, like Pierre suggested at the beginning, as also the final point, is about what changes, you know, that that the Tunis seminar came about because there are differences in opinion, not only in the International Council, but also in the movements around, about how the World Social Forum needs to be restructured. There are several points where everybody agrees. That is, for instance, that to conceive it as a process, the World Social Forum, and not as a series of events, permanent process, and that we try to reach a convergence, and the ones say there is an action instrument of mobilization the World Social Forum as such would have to take up. The others disagree on that. If we follow this question, there very soon arrives how decisions are going to be made. Tord already mentioned the idea, which is very much now accepted as such by a broad majority of the International Council, is to stage assemblies. Assemblies, say the ones like me, for instance, who have to be based on regional assemblies. So the structure would be more egalitarian than in the past. And there is the question if this decision making can be reach a point of consensus. In which does that consist? The consensus, if it is unanimity, like it has been until now, that everybody is to agree, which gives the possibility of a small, very small minority, or sometimes one organization, to block everything. Or if we can find it a percentage, if that is a structure which involves, let's say, like two legs. On the one hand, the International Council, on the other hand, the Assembly. These are the discussions which are going on without any conclusion for a long time already, and we need to get to a decision in Tunis, and that's why we have in these continental dialogues, like a dialogue here on Europe, there was one on Asia, Africa, and the Middle East also. And they will also come up with a certain position or certain opinions about the subject matter of restructuring, and that is what we should be talking about, to have some clarification on the eve of Tunis, which is going to take place very soon, from the 30th of November to the 3rd of December. Tord.
Yeah, I have always been opposing the whole idea that decisions can be made in the name of whole world social forum, or in the name of anybody else than those who sign the statement. This is very simple. I think this is totally necessary to build trust with bigger organizations. They will never accept that decisions are made in their name without their acceptance of this. This is the experience we have had in many things, and that's why I think what is now stated about consensus is confusing. There is no such thing as new roles for deciding things at assemblies. But there is, on the other hand, a very negative aspect in terms of time-consuming, endless filibuster discussions about this issue from the other side of these factions. I've been opposing both factions from the very start, and I still do it on the ground of what Ole talks about. What is the need for movements? They need to have both things. They need to have efficient decision-making, and that no decisions are made in their name. And they don't need decisions made in the whole name of the whole World Social Forum. That can be kept open space. But to make efficient statements for such things that movements, the main movements need, who address all the issues, refugee issues, peace issues, environmental issues, social justice issues. Friends of the Earth is doing this, Via Campesina is doing this, International Peace Bureau is doing this. For these movements, they do need a lot more, less discussions, filibuster discussions. They need a clear time schedule. And that time schedule includes thematic assemblies, sufficient space. They necessarily need to compete with each other, because it's not possible to give time for everyone. So there is no other assembly at the same time. That is a necessity, but there should be reasonably enough time for it. When it comes to regional assemblies, this is the really key here. It's very simple. They don't compete with each other. It's perfect. They can have the same time spot. And these regional things, it's very good if they can develop on a more detailed level than the Continental, which has been proposed by Leo, for instance. So with other words, parallel at the same time, regional things. This goes totally against the open space concept, which is competition, competition, competition. Those with money can dominate the process. Saying regional ones means that 3 people from Central Asia might be as important as the whole Western Europe. That is totally necessary to bring in representativity at the geographic level. Of course, cannot make any decisions in the name of the whole World Forum. They only make decisions or discuss on their own. But that would give a total different character of the World Social Forum. And then finally, for those thematic assemblies and those regions that might be interested, there can be a final common assembly of convergence, call it whatever you will, and that is the possibility to enable a prepared common discussion without any attempt saying that all assemblies should be there or at all regionals, but to those movements that need to address the complexity of the whole crisis and don't want to be part of a supermarket for policies, progressive policies that never converge because they compete and compete and compete endlessly without not assemblies, but one assembly only speaking in its own name. And then, of course, an agora afterwards, which I think Pierre has been pushing for well, but they should not compete with the General Assembly. This is fully possible to decide. It's fully within the World Social Forum thing, and but it's for some reason one starts discussions about consensus or that it's impossible to have convergence. I think it's time to discuss concrete proposals. That I think is the answer to Ole's question that nobody answered in Florence, which is instead abstract things. Answer, Ole.
Todd, yes. Let's give space to everybody. this is the proposal. What is true that up until now, the World Social Forum as such has prohibited itself to plan common actions as such. Actions should only be made according to this point of the chart by the different organizations. What is your opinion? Should the World Social Forum come up in the final round with decision on actions on what we have called the global agenda for mobilizations, or still should it remain like it is at the present moment? I really want everybody to give his opinion. It's very important. Isabelle.
Oui, très brièvement, je pense qu'il y a une différence, Léo, entre que le forum ait une position commune sur des sujets du monde ou que le forum ait une position, une volonté d'action globale, de lancer des actions, c'est juste de lancer des actions globales à toutes les associations du forum en lançant des actions globales par rapport à l'agenda mondial. Je pense que ça pourrait être une très bonne chose qui n'oblige pas à ce que tout le monde ait la même position. Oups, ma connexion. Qui n'oblige pas à ce que tout le monde ait la même position. C'est ça qui est un peu difficile au Forum social mondial, mais je pense que, pour donner mon avis, je pense que ce serait vraiment bien qu'à certains moments de l'année, le forum, le Conseil international appelle à toutes les associations du Forum social mondial à agir dans certains contextes qui sont des luttes internationales. Là, je pense que ce serait utile. C'est fini.
Très bien, merci. Rosie. Rosie.
Gracias, Leo. Voy a hablar en español. Tenemos
Muy bien.
intérpretes, entonces va a haber interpretación. Bueno, creo, estoy siguiendo con atención lo que están compartiendo. Me parece que esto que dice Thor, no sé si espero haberlo entendido bien, que cada quien, algo así como cada quien se rasque o abogue por sus problemas en cada continente. Yo creo que el sentido de estos diálogos continentales, porque ya hemos tenido uno en Asia, uno tuvimos uno en el norte de África, uno de las Américas y ahora de Europa, pues nos ayudan por un lado a conocer qué está pasando en cada territorio, acercarnos un poco más. Sabemos que no estamos todos, por supuesto, pero es una manera de sentir a los movimientos, ¿no? Nuestra capacidad de convocatoria y hacer esta lectura crítica de la realidad que vivimos. No se trata de que todos hagamos algo en cada territorio, sino los que viven en ese territorio hagan algo por ese territorio. Y a la vez, cómo identificar las agendas comunes para también visibilizarla en otros territorios, ver que hay cosas en común. Y creo que, bueno, creo que es importante que como integrantes del Consejo Internacional nos pronunciemos. Creo que ya una vez hicimos un pronunciamiento donde afirmamos como las organizaciones integrantes del Consejo Internacional nos solidarizamos con tal o cual persona. Creo que es importante abonar al respecto, ¿no? Y creo que el Foro Social Mundial es un espacio en el que pueden confluir diferentes actores y también nos permite reconocer quiénes no están dentro y quiénes podrían o deberían también sumarse o sumarnos para defender sus banderas. Bueno, eso diría yo brevemente, Leo, gracias.
Muchas gracias, Rosy. La cuestión the question, the basic question is now, like you have heard different opinions, whether we can or we should produce common actions, and finally, whether we should try to get some decisions on a common ground, which has been prepared by talks of convergence and so on. But if there is finally an outcome of this huge effort of trying to organize on a global level, is there, please tell me also, like for instance on the Kurdish network, if you can tell us what is your opinion. Is there a need for such a common action scheme? Or Gerard, what do you think about this subject? Perhaps and Igor or any other, please. We have talked a lot. The floor is yours. Gérard, le microphone. On ne t'entend pas parce que ton microphone est fermé.
Voilà,
Voilà.
c'est fait. Merci. Oui, bon, effectivement, moi je crois qu'on peut quand même s'appuyer peut-être sur, parce qu'il y a quand même quelque chose dont on ne parle pas, c'est que nous avons une organisation internationale qui s'appelle les Nations Unies et qui prend des initiatives, du moins son Assemblée générale, et qui décide souvent des journées d'action ou des journées thématiques sur des grands thèmes quand même. Et moi, je pense que si on veut des actions communes, je pense les migrations ou les droits de l'homme ou les droits humains, etc., qui se posent.
Doucement pour les interprètes,
Ah,
s'il vous plaît.
D'accord. Je répète, non, ça va?
Non, ça va.
Ça va, oui, voilà. Hein. S'appuyer sur ces journées, peut-être, sur ces journées onusiennes, peut-être, pour faire quelque chose en commun, un appel des organisations du Forum social mondial, hein, pour se servir de ces journées pour avancer un certain nombre de thématiques très concrètes. Hein, je pense sur les droits de l'homme ou sur les migrations, peut-être, ou sur d'autres choses. Il y a beaucoup d'autres sujets. On peut pratiquement tout trouver dans les Nations Unies. Ou la question de la Journée internationale de la paix, par exemple, le 21 septembre, où on pourrait faire converger un certain nombre de choses. Voilà, c'est un peu, je ne sais pas si ça peut passer au sein du Forum social mondial, mais je crois qu'il faut qu'on s'appuie quand même un peu sur les institutions internationales qui en ont bien besoin, parce que l'une des premières victimes de ce qui se passe actuellement dans le monde, en particulier avec la guerre en Ukraine et les déréglementations générales, c'est le système onusien qui en prend, je dirais, un sacré coup. Voilà, donc, parce que je ne vois pas comment, autrement, on pourrait relier les choses. Il faut donner des perspectives aux gens en même temps. Voilà. Dans le premier camp, comment dirais-je, quand Léo parlait, effectivement, le cessez-le-feu, effectivement, mais je pense qu'en Europe, par exemple, il y a peut-être le cessez-le-feu, effectivement, qu'on pourrait avancer. Mais pourquoi ne nous lancerions pas un appel au gouvernement européen, mais l'Europe au sens large, je parle de l'Europe d'Helsinki, de l'OSCE, l'Organisation pour la sécurité et la coopération européenne, en y excluant peut-être les États-Unis et le Canada. Je parle vraiment des pays européens, voilà, au sens large, donc, hein, un appel effectivement pour le cessez-le-feu en Europe, effectivement en Ukraine, mais aussi un appel à tous les gouvernements de ces pays-là pour que nous leur lancions l'idée de faire une grande conférence pour la sécurité et la coopération en Europe. Voilà, un appel. Donc, quand on parle de sécurité et de coopération, ça inclut beaucoup de choses en Europe, hein. Ça inclut effectivement la question militaire, mais pas seulement, les questions économiques, les questions d'immigration, hein, quand on parle de sécurité. Voilà. Donc, bon, voilà, ce sont des idées que je lance,
D'accord.
hein. Est-ce que c'est…
D'accord, merci
Pour voir comment on
Gérald.
peut articuler cela avec ce qui existe au niveau institutionnel mondial, dont on ne se sert pas beaucoup, je dois dire.
Très bien. Pierre est le camarade de Kurdish Network. Pierre.
Okay, I will speak in English. I think I am part of those who have signed the text reaffirming the World Social Forum as an open space. I will circulate the declaration now in the chat so you can see it. This is a short text that is has just circulated among members of the International Council, just to clarify how we look at the future of the forum. I think the questions made by Leo are not exactly the questions that were agreed in those discussions. Anyway, I will make a little review of what is possible. First, I would say I feel a lot of people that we in the International Council, we are facilitators of the open space. And we, as participants, we are not at the center of the space. As facilitators, I would say we are under the space. We sustain the space. We try to develop it. And as participants, because we are facilitators, we are not at the center of the space. And I think many people tend to mix and confuse those roles. Because they are facilitators under the space, they think they are at the center of the space and they should speak and make things, inviting the others, etc., taking a specific role. That's one. The second is that in the open space, there is many possibilities that are unexplored or underexplored. It took the self-organized assemblies that Todd has mentioned, whether they are thematic or regional, territorial, they can be organized as meetings. And this, here comes what he called the competition, what I call the parallelism. Because at the end of a meeting, of a WSF event, there is a lot of parallelism that's necessary because there is no, and it's acceptable because we are talking of organizations, so they can send delegates in different simultaneous assemblies. It's not a problem. But this is just an event. This is just assembly meetings. And if you want to have influence, if you want to have sway, you need to have a more constant and permanent operation. And that's where Todd has made a proposal about making a certain assembly more permanent, having sessions outside of the WSF event. This is perfectly possible. This is in the hand of those who are facilitating this assembly, trying to make it more permanent, create something that's more than a family photo with a declaration from time to time, every 2 years. So this is also a way to get to creating bodies that are able to have reactivity, make calls, look after implement the actions that are in the call, etc. Have a consistency, a persistence, and become visible political actors that are multi-stakeholder with many organizations involved with their own protocols of decision and communication. And this, they can use the forum as attack or whatever organization use the forum. They can organize activities, they can, or if they show their multiplicity of stakeholders, they can organize assembly in the forum space. And they do exactly what they want. So that's, I would say this is perfectly doable with as we have everything now.
Okay.
I finished. There is a third dimension which you will see at in the text, the declaration we have put there, is that you can have also such a building that pretends to become a process in itself that is linked in the spirit of the social forum, but is not the social forum. That would become another type of process, exploring a new way, and that's the idea of social assemblies. So it's up to those who want to build this. Either they permanentize, sorry for this neologism, an assembly that is starting in the forum space and become autonomous and visible and permanent and making calls, or they want to have that, but give this creation a more generic social forum idea, and so they want to qualify to become a social assembly, which is not clear yet what it is, but it could be included in a broader WSF context. Not in WSF I finish space. So the answer is you can have assembly meetings during in the space. You can have permanentized assembly meetings which are outside and inside because they participate as anyone in the forum. Do you say attack is in the WSF? No, attack is participating in the WSF, but has its own existence. So this permanentized assembly, it's the same. They have their own life and they use the forum as actors and participants. And you have this other, even more ambitious perspective, which is building these permanentized assemblies as social assemblies. That means that this opens a new type of discussion. What is this big WSF context? I finish. At the present time, we have the World Social Forum, Porto Alegre. We have thematic social forums, national social forums. We have a collection of about 20 significant forums in the world. We made a meeting in September 2020, having a conversation with their respective facilitating committees. So what do we do with this family of processes that for the moment are different, but they all claim to be social forum processes?
Yeah, you are talking already very long.
You have talked also, Leo, I'm just finishing. So this, if you complete this family with social assemblies,
Pierre, please
processes,
respect the time.
Yeah, I respect. I just tried the occasion to explain because we have been asked to explain this idea of social assembly, so I'm explaining. So it's a process that would self-locate in this family of social forum related processes. It's an option, it's a possibility. We can stay with what Todd proposes, which is a permanentized assembly that comes from time to time to make activities and assemblies in the forum, as would be a permanent social movement assemblies, for instance. So you have these three grades of possibilities, and for me, it's a bit surprising that people that are asking for action, for actorship, they don't invest in building such permanentized assemblies, which is totally open. I mean, there is no authorization to ask to anybody.
Okay, thank you. From the Kurdish network, the comrade has raised his hand. Hello? Your microphone is closed.
Yes, yes, Leo, excuse me. It was like for the first point. Excuse the confusion. Are you hearing me?
Yes, if you want to say something, say it now because we are already finishing.
Yes, yes, yes. No, but it was like more on the subject of the ceasefire and the situation in Kurdistan, but we'll have anyway the occasion to discuss it in the
No,
following days.
say what
so
your
it's not
your
necessary.
opinion is. Say what your opinion
Okay.
is.
Well, I think like I will try to make it short, but I mean in a such situation of aggression from the Turkish state, so in north and eastern Syria and the northern Iraq, and also clear attempt of occupation accompanied by several war crimes and using of chemical weapons. Like, of course, a ceasefire can be a first step, but I think we can have the ambition as different movements to ask at the end to solve the problem, not just the consequences, but the causes. So to ask really for a political solution for Kurdistan, which at the end regroup the two propositions that were made by first stopping the harassing of the movements, so by finding a political solution, and two, stopping this militarization of the politics. And I think by finding a political solution can be like the convergence of those two propositions that the friends proposed. Thank you very much once again for your.
You mean the World Social Forum can be a point of convergence, if I understood you.
No, like there was two propositions. No, one made by you and one made by Todd about finding points of convergence, which is condemning the militarization of politics, and the second one, which is stopping the harassment of the political movements. And then the friend was giving the example of Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
So I think by fighting and mobilizing for as a point of convergence for mobilization for finding politics and be the convergence of those two positions. So one against militarization, second against the harassing of the political movement.
Okay. Christine.
Yes.
Your microphone.
Oh, sorry. I think, no, I'm not sure if the open space really will help movements to come together and to work together and really go forward and come to a more peaceful world than we have now. And I think the time changes. And it's also a different time to the beginning of the World Social Forum and even to the virtual World Social Forum in 2021. And I think we not really recognize what the Corona pandemic have done to all the movements and how it has weakened on one side the movements, on the other side of strengthens the movement, because with all these virtual meetings, we have special in the call. These calls are existing, and movements collecting signatures to act. We are sending actually a letter to the president of Mexico to really get involved to his proposal for negotiations between Ukraine and Russia to come to a ceasefire and things like this. And I think this is more important than only to have an open space where a lot of people are discussing and what to have some events, but with which relevance. How I think if the World Social Forum as this will have a function, it should also be a political actor, and it should support all initiatives who are working together, and also distribute the materials, not only have sessions and discuss, is this a good proposal or not, and is this a good analysis or not, and can we say all together, yes, do it or not? No, this is not. I think I can do better things in my time than to sit in this council. And I have no idea actually how it was elected or not. It's existing, but with democratic legitimization. But this is another discussion.
Okay, that we are going to discuss in Tunis. I got already signs that our interpreters are quite tired, and it is also getting to the end. So if there are two hands up of Tord and Ole, please be short so that we can wrap it up.
Okay, there are, I think, a solution. I understand the worries of both factions, but we cannot discuss impossible things. There is no such thing as an assembly of social movements outside the World Social Forum. There's not one single person proposing it, in spite of Pierre saying the opposite thing. I don't propose this, and why he says I propose this, I do not understand. There is no reason whatsoever to have an assembly of social movements outside the World Social Forum. They exist already, exactly like Christine Carr said. At the World Peace Congress, we had it in Stockholm, etc., etc. We don't need at all something outside. It should be inside, of course. Otherwise, there is. Secondly, there is no such thing as a consensus decision. That is exactly destroying the possibility to get main movements on board. And what is the solution is very simple. When an assembly of social movement needs to make a decision and a small minority don't want to be included in that decision, don't include them. And then we have solved the problem. So with other words, it's a non-problem. But if we start to talk about consensus in the IC, etc., then we run into problem, but not in the assemblies. It's easy, solved. Thank you.
Thank you. Ole, you have the last intervention.
Okay, I'll just give a very brief comment on things I think are relevant to discuss in Tunis in regard of what we are talking about now. First of all, I think we need to figure out how the World Social Forum can be useful for the social movement, for civil society organization, the activists and others too, and the alternatives. So what can we do? So it's found to be useful and relevant and not another burden of an overloaded work pile already, but something that makes the work easier. And the second thing I think we need to the second thing I think we need to discuss is how can the World Social Forum and what the work that are done there have an impact. How can we make sure that all those initiatives, discussions, campaigns, strategies that are shared, that we actually live there, and that it makes a greater impact. And I think this needs to be the start of the discussion point, rather than this space actor kind of discussion to figure out what will help the social movements by going there, and how can we make sure it has impact. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was a good point about the impact. And as we all know, since we are participating in movements, the biggest impact is action and confrontation, and not only talk among ourselves. If we get together into a formal structure which can produce these actions, it would be good. And that will be discussed in Tunis, and hopefully we come to some point of agreement, because in a world where so many splits are happening on the side of movements, it would be very good that the World Social Forum could embrace, in the literal sense, abrazo, the different kind of movement, to move forward and not backward. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to see many of you in Tunis. Rosie. Well.
Gracias, Leo. Muchas gracias, Leo. Gracias a todos por el diálogo. Sin duda hay muchas cosas para seguir debatiendo, y creo que es un punto para el diálogo que vamos a tener en Túnez. Muy importantes sus aportes y reflexiones. Gracias a los intérpretes, a la compañera, a todos los compañeros intérpretes que estuvieron aquí, que nos ayudan a cruzar estos puentes. A Teresa, a Claudia, a Paula, a Johan, déjenme ver quién más, que no se me escapen, Fernanda, David, de diferentes territorios, desde Estados Unidos, Venezuela, Brasil, en fin, Venezuela, estamos ahí. Muchas gracias, Leo.
Y gracias, Rosy, por tu ayuda.
Chao, chao. Cuídense mucho.